So, our heroes have now lost Yuamu, as she bravely tried to stand up to Phaser, but the dark depths of the sea and the strength of the crashing waves proved too much for her to handle, and thus she got carded. In doing so, though, we do learn that the carded characters are sent to a different dimension in where they all become cats. Yep, I'm not making it up. Let's just talk about it. Hello everyone and welcome to Dueling with Downton, and today we're talking all things episode 60 of the Yugioh Go Rush anime series. A decent episode, even if the duel was quick. Personally, I love the things that were outside of the duel within this episode, more so than the duel itself. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on more here. Firstly, Phaser's secret and the cats that we see at the end of the episode that characters get turned into. Could this be connected? A quick idea that I'm sure other people have had, but that occurred to me while watching this episode, was Phaser's big secret. Could he have used his friends or people that are close to him in order to create his first maximum? And maybe, just maybe, it was those 3 cats that we see at the preview for the next episode. Because they don't look like any of our heroes that we know of at this moment in time. However, the only thing against that particular idea is that those 3 mystery cats in the preview look like the 3 main trap cards that Tremolo uses. So it's possible that it's more likely to be Tremolo's maximum materials instead of Phaser's. But to extend this idea, maybe for Phaser it was his family members that she's used to create his maximums because they had an illness. And we see Phaser have an illness at the end of episode 58, where he collapsed. And now we've got this sort of added knowledge that he might not remember what happened in that sort of collapsation. So what if, in order to save his family who had the same disease as himself, he needed to card them in order to kind of cure them of that illness, but doesn't know of a way to reverse the carding effects? That's what I'm going with here, as a quick mini-theory. However, seeing some of our heroes in cat form within the next episode preview was just so adorable, especially seeing the Yuna and Asaka cat. It's good seeing them reunited for once, and their designs actually are really cool. But I guess we'll talk more about the heroes turned to cats in the next episode, or in the comments down below if you want to talk about it there. But let's return to the events that happened in episode 60. After all, we need to talk about how much of a badass Ranran has been this entire arc. She is the MVP, always diving in to make the saves, taking a lot of action and showcasing her ninja skills. And basically her genuine good morals. She was there at the night that Yugioh lost to Phaser, and unlike Yuhi, she didn't let fear stop her from doing the right thing. Plus, I like how Ranran is being paired with Dueling, and the two are working together quite well despite their rocky start. As we've already seen within this arc, that Yugioh has changed his views towards how he acts towards Dueling/the Earthdemar, in asking and showing respect and kind of gratitude towards it. Just like here, we have Dueling asking Ranran and helping Ranran instead of forcing that help, like it did when it possessed her back in season 1. So yeah, I kind of like this pairing. Now, I loved how overprotective the UTS adults were being over Yuamu's safety, as once again this just shows that their dedication and their caringness towards the kids and their well-being. Even after they were horrified in seeing Yuamu get carded, they still sprint in and take action, assisting Yudius and Tenzaki, preventing MIK from getting Yuamu's card. Now, the duel itself was rather short, and it created this feeling of over-convenience. For example, on turn 1, Phaser just happened to draw all 3 pieces of his maximum, and then on turn 2, he did the exact same thing. Now, this isn't new for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or even Rush Dueling, because Atem does the exact same thing in Season 1. So if you're crying over Phaser doing this, then you've got to give Atem the same treatment. It's anime BS, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Get over it. But at the same time, my main issue with this duel is that it felt too one-sided. Now, we know that Yuamu is a good and decent duelist, and she does showcase a relatively okay strategy within this episode. But there are some things I'm going to talk about in a minute that I really wish doesn't happen in brush dueling. But back to Phaser, with this duel and what they were trying to do, I get it. They want to hype Phaser up even more. They want to make him this threat, because they haven't really showcased this very much or enough of this threatening sort of vibes that he gives off yet within this arc. And I do like the change in tone of his voice from this episode, and the more darker and creepier atmosphere that accompanies this. We get to see Phaser get fixated on how and why Yuga and the Odo twins make him feel a certain way. He's obsessed with wanting to know what they see from him. He says that he wants to erase the Odo family line from, the history or the future. And that line there just kind of makes it a bit more edgier for the character. Personally, though, one reason why I really like this, though, is because it makes Phaser look like he's slightly losing control, even though his enemies are falling one by one. Which is kind of the opposite in the way that a villain should be feeling. When a villain is constantly winning and his enemies are constantly falling, he should be happy. He should be, overcome with his power and, godlike complexes. But instead, he seems a bit more unstable as we go forward within this arc. I don't know, that could just be me though. And speaking of enemies, and speaking of the enemy, who is left to stand against Phaser? Well, I'll say Yugioh, but we need time for Yugioh to be able to understand why the Odo cards are important and then formulate a strategy in how he's going to take Phaser down. So we need to look at who can stall Phaser for time, while our heroes in the cat dimension figure out their stuff, and Yugioh figures out his stuff. So I was looking through the characters and seeing who we could possibly go with, and here are three possible. Rovian. She needs to start acting because she hasn't done much yet this arc, and we've been teased it, but we need to see it. Yugioh, because we don't want to see Yugioh come into this arc, have an amazing duel, and then not do anything else. Plus, who wants to see a Yugioh cat? I think everyone does. And finally, the Luke. Yugioh isn't on Earth, nor is he with his crew. Instead, he's somewhere else, and we don't know where exactly he's to. But what if he has gone to ask the Luke for assistance? After all, we know there's a connection between the Luke and Yuga because of the time they spent together on the Luke ship. In between the Luke arc ending and then, the final duel with Yugioh. Now, I don't think you should be able to tribute a maximum for another maximum, as this just seems cheap. Instead, you should only be able to tribute a maximum for a level 6 or lower monster, because a maximum is classified as one card / monster, so it would stand to reason that you can't, do a level 7 or higher monster as tribute because you need 2 or more materials. Now, obviously, the way the Phaser just kind of discards his maximum off his field, I understand it, because cards like Yuamu's equipped spell card that she used within this episode would lock your opponent out from playing. But still, discarding your maximum just for another just seems like a silly rule to me, and personally, I feel like Phaser should have had to have done more to overcome the strategy that Yuamu had put into place, instead of just simply going, I don't want this maximum anymore, take it off, maximum summon again, done. It just seems like a cop-out, personally. On a different note though, Phaser's new maximum genuinely does look amazing, and is probably my favourite design to maximum from this arc. As for Yuamu in this episode, I loved her character's reactions. Seeing the look of shock, seeing the look of despair, these were beautifully and perfectly animated. But we do get a follow-up reaction from Yuamu where she gives the classic Odo smile as she finally realizes the truth. And you know what that does? It just ticks Phaser off even more, and I loved it. Now, her thoughts about not getting depressed over Yuhi. I've seen people get a bit upset over this, and personally, I just think this is a way of her coping and making sure that she continues to move forward. As we know, she does deeply care about her brother. Yes, she could be hurting, because Yuhi had never informed her of his actions before facing Tremolo. But she's also having to try and solve this sort of mess on her own, using methods that aren't really accustomed to how Yuamu would normally approach things. She even says it herself. She uses facts and logic and what she sees in front of her, where Yuhi normally goes on instinct. And that instinct that Yuhi had has led him to this, this answer. So Yuamu in this episode is taking that kind of approach, which is why we see her slightly out of character in facing a Phaser head-on instead of trying to formulate a plan with everybody else and be a bit more, not sneaky as such, but a bit more laid out. That just sounds wrong. So overall, I did really enjoy this episode as the plot continues to move forward, and we got some crazy reveals. But the show is at least trying to up Phaser's evilness and make him seem more threatening instead of just an over-powerful obstacle for our heroes to overcome, and I appreciate what they're trying to do with this character now. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more things Yu-Gi-Oh, and have a great day. Arigato, matane, goodbye.